Ask anyone who created Spider-Man. You'll probably get one name: Stan Lee. He was the face of Marvel Comics, a showman who dreamed up a nerdy teenager named Peter Parker. But that's only half the story. The iconic red and blue suit, the web shooters, and the very soul of the character, his awkwardness, his anxiety, his quiet determination, all came from a man who was nearly written out of the narrative, a man who wanted nothing to do with the spotlight. He had an idea for a teenage hero with spider powers, bogged down by everyday problems. This is the story of Steve Ditko, the reclusive genius who was the true architect of the Spider-Man we know and love, and why his monumental contribution was pushed into the shadows for decades. The beginning. In the early 1960s, Stan Lee, head writer for Marvel Comics, was tasked with inventing new heroes to go up against DC's Justice League. His first stop was Jack Kirby, the powerhouse artist who had co-created Captain America and the Fantastic Four. But Kirby's version of Spider-Man was too heroic, too muscular, and too confident. Lee would give a brief synopsis, and the artist would then go draw the entire 20-plus page story. Figuring out the pacing, the action, it was about ideology. During his time at Marvel, Steve Ditko became a devoted follower of objectivism, the philosophy created by writer Ayn Rand that champions radical individualism and a black-and-white view of morality, and often adding major plot points. But as an individual on a quest for moral perfection, this vision slammed right into Stan Lee's. After The Amazing Spider-Man number 38, Steve Ditko quit. He walked away from Marvel and left his co-creation at the absolute height of its popularity, never to draw Spider-Man for Marvel again. He wanted to keep Spider-Man the perpetually struggling, relatable everyman. You could feel the tension in the comics. He almost never gave interviews, firmly believing that his work should speak for itself. The honest truth is that it was a messy, deeply conflicted, but undeniably brilliant partnership. Stan Lee was the visionary showman whose snappy dialogue gave Marvel its signature voice. But the man who gave Spider-Man his iconic look, his visual language, and the core of his tormented soul was Steve Ditko. While Stan Lee was making movie cameos and becoming a beloved pop culture icon, Ditko was living a quiet life in a New York City studio, working right up until his death in 2018. He wanted no part of the fame machine. He just wanted the work to be his legacy, as Ditko would plot stories reflecting his objectivist views, but he did retreat from the public eye. He went on to work for DC Comics, creating characters like the Question and the Creeper. He also created Mr. A hero who was the ultimate embodiment of his objectivist philosophy. Be sure to hit that like button. Comment below with your thoughts on the Lee and Ditko debate, and subscribe for more untold stories behind your favorite heroes. Thanks for watching. Only for Lee's dialogue to soften the hard edges. Then, the finished art went back to Lee, who would write the dialogue. The two were reportedly not even on speaking terms, communicating only through middlemen. He was the co-author and the architect of Peter Parker's world. While one man took the stage, the other one built the entire theater from the shadows, without the quiet, uncompromising genius of Steve Ditko. The friendly neighborhood Spider-Man would never have become the global icon he is today. Stan Lee reportedly wanted the Goblin to be revealed as a completely new character, to show the chaotic nature of life. It wasn't the awkward, relatable kid Stan was imagining, so the pages were scrapped. Ditko was officially credited not just as the artist, but as the plotter. But this process also created a huge, unresolvable question. If one person has the rough idea, and another person plots and draws the entire story, who is the real creator? From his objectivist point of view, it was critical that the villain be someone from Peter's world, so that his evil had meaning and consequences. He had been planting clues for issues that the villain was Norman Osborn, the father of Peter's friend Harry. This gray area was the seed of their eventual falling out. The project was on life support, he famously said. Stan Lee thought the name up. I did the costume, web gimmick on wrist and spider signal. He was a quiet, intense artist whose style buzzed with a kind of nervous energy. He was a master at drawing mood and anxiety, which made him the perfect person for a character defined by his personal demons. The publisher was already convinced that people would be disgusted by a hero named after a spider. The project needed a totally different kind of artist, someone who could capture vulnerability, not just power. It needed someone who understood what it felt like to be an outsider. It needed Steve Ditko. Ditko designed the full-face mask, a brilliant move that meant anyone could imagine themselves behind it. He created the complex web pattern and the iconic web shooter's a gadget. It grounded the character in science instead of magic. He drew Peter Parker not as a chiseled hero, but as a lanky, awkward teen with thick glasses. Ditko's Spider-Man didn't pose heroically. He crouched and contorted in strange, almost inhuman ways. This wasn't just illustrating an idea. It was the visual birth of the character's entire identity. The architect Steve Ditko was the opposite of the larger-than-life Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. When Lee gave him the concept, Ditko didn't just draw it. He built it from the ground up. That costume was a game-changer. The Marvel method, the way Lee and Ditko worked together, was governed by the Marvel method, a system born out of crushing production schedules. This process gave artists like Ditko a massive amount of creative control. In fact, starting with the Amazing Spider-Man number 25, a clash of ideals, but this wasn't just about getting credit. His philosophy started to bleed right onto the pages of his work. Ditko saw Spider-Man not just as a normal guy. For the last year they worked together, the breaking point was the identity of the Green Goblin. Ditko fundamentally disagreed. This creative fight was the final straw. Life after Marvel. After leaving Marvel, Ditko didn't fade away. For the rest of his life, Ditko became a legendary recluse. Conclusion: so, who really created Spider-Man? He was more than just the artist. If you enjoyed this deep dive into comic book history,